The new Lamzu Atlantis versions have arrived and these support 4000 Hz. But there are also a few other changes, for example the feet design is now larger. The mouse comes pre-installed with 4 feet, but you got the option to use 2 larger feet as well. Both sets are very good and basically the best stock feet that you can get. The black charcoal coating also has a small change to it, so it's a little bit smoother than previously, but not nearly as smooth as other smooth touch coatings. It's not the best coating for my skin type, but Lamzu does provide these grip tapes which are good and improve the experience quite a bit for me. Otherwise, there is really nothing new about the quality or the feel of the mouse. The clicks, the side buttons and the scroll wheel feel pretty much the same. And again, I would prefer these clicks to be a little bit lighter for them to be easier to spam in-game. The only other thing to mention is that this is the first Lamzu mouse for me that has some creaking, but it's nothing that would actually happen in real use or in-game. So let's go ahead and jump to the interesting part of the video, at least for me, and that is the performance. The Lamzu version 2 Pro now has a Nordic MCU and the 3395 from Pulsar. So Lamzu is actually not using a complex MCU anymore, but the firmware is still provided by them. With this setup, Lamzu manages respectable results at 4000 Hz, 2000 Hz and 1000 Hz. And looking at the latency against other mice, Lamzu is not quite a top tier performer on any polling rate, but these are still good results. However, there are some issues with the polling stability. 2 and 4000 Hz are fairly stable, but there is still this instability that you can see on the left side of the graph, and 1000 Hz is actually quite massively screwed up. To be fair, most people will not notice this at all, but it's still somewhat screwed up that if you can't run the mouse at 4K, you're not gonna have an optimal experience at 1000 Hz. Moving over to click latency, and the initial results were actually quite bad. 2.25 milliseconds is of course not horrible by any means, but it's surprisingly bad for 4000 Hz as it loses to many 1000 Hz mice even. There is a slight positive twist to the story, as I reported this to Lamzu and they managed to somewhat fix it. With the official version of the drivers, you can now set the debounce to 0 milliseconds, which will result in 1.36 milliseconds of click latency. It's still not that great as we are still losing to 1000 Hz mice, but it's much better than it used to be. And of course this applies to all polling rate settings, so it's about 1 millisecond faster across the board. With this, I will have to say that the mouse does not quite perform as well as you would want from 4000 Hz mice. It's also quite worrying that if your system can't run 4K and is quite unstable as it is, you might actually even run into issues with 1000 Hz. But price is also of course one thing to consider, and this is significantly cheaper than G-Wolves and Razer mice at the moment. Even with that though, I still think that there is quite a bit of work to be done for Lamzu and Kammyz. Once these issues are fixed, and even now for those that can run the mouse at 4K, this is pretty crazy value for money in the US. In Europe it costs 120 euros from Max Gaming, which is still quite a bit less than other 4K mice, but of course the performance does not match up to them. It's up to you if you think this value is great or not, but for me, if I go for a 4000 Hz mouse, I want the performance to be top tier. To be clear, it's more than unlikely that any of this would actually affect you in-game, as I don't really believe that a gaming mouse can make you a better or a worse player. You make the mouse does not make you. But it's more so about the principle and actually bringing it to your guys' attention that how good these mice actually are which these companies make. And at the same time, these brands can actually improve their implementation, which is of course always a good thing. Lower latency will never hurt. If you have been living under a rock and you have no clue how the Atlantis version 2 shape is, it's basically very close to an LethalGamingGear XM2. There are ever so slight differences on the shape which you can hopefully see from the B-roll. These are so minor that in the case that you like the shape of the XM2WE, there is almost no way that you will not like the Lamzu Atlantis shape. You can tell that they are different, but it should be very easy for you to adapt from one to another. One thing actually left to mention is that the battery life is as it usually is with 4K mice, so this would last you about 2 to 3 days depending on how much you use the mouse. That's it for this one. I'm basically recording this video on the morning of Juhannus Aatto here in Finland, so if you happen to be Finnish, hyvää juhannusta, or if you celebrate a midsummer fest or anything like that this weekend, have a good one. I'm gonna get a little bit drunk and I'll see you in the next video.